The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
It's coming.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you and daunting me. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoke and gasoline. It's just a ghost of you and me. Of you and me. All these whispers.
My name is James Hershey.
In the rain.
Right back.
All these shadows in my mind. With my reflection I can't find. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoke and gasoline. It's just a
I know how to
ghost
do it.
of you and me. Of you and me. Don't let 'em take you away. Don't let 'em bring you down inside. It's just the mirrors in your mind. Don't let 'em bring you down.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and with me, as always, my co-host, Old Boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. How's everybody doing? Misfits, Sugar Ladies, and Demon Hunters. I'm doing great tonight.
We are also joined tonight by a good friend of the show. He is the director of 100 Tears, Rot, American Guinea Pig, Bloodshock, a bunch of different movies. He does special effects. He does it all. He is the guru of gore, Marcus Koch. How you doing, brother?
Pretty good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure. Marcus wanted to come on tonight to discuss a couple of different interesting theories. And I'm going to throw back over to Marcus real quick and let him, first of all, tell anybody who doesn't know who he is, which I don't know who that would be, but anybody that doesn't, tell our audience, who you are and everything and what you wanted to talk about tonight.
My name's Marcus Koch. I do special effects on a lot of independent horror films. I've been working for the last 20 years, but the other side of things on the personal side, not the movie side, is I'm a huge fan of just weird conspiracy theories. It's just something I've always loved reading up on. And recently you guys did a Flat Earth podcast, and so I thought it'd be fun if we did the polar opposite and go into Hollow Earth, the other fun theory.
Yeah, Hollow Earth is a beast of a theory. It's got so many different moving parts. There's multiple different legends about the Hollow Earth, and it's actually backed up by a lot of folklore and mythology from ancient times. It goes all the way from the Greeks. They had the underworld where they had Hades and all that. The Jews had Sheol. The Germans, they had their own version. The Native Americans believed that a certain tribe came from under the earth and came out through a cavern. I believe that was in Missouri. In Christianity, of course, you have a bunch of different stuff down there. You have hell is down in the earth. You have Abraham's bosom, which was down there, which later got taken over by hell. And there's all kinds of interesting stuff down there. So this is backed up by a whole lot of legend and a whole lot of folklore. And there's a couple different theories on what it is. One is that the inside of the earth is just hollow, plain and simple, like a chocolate bunny on Easter. It's hollow. And inside the earth there's another sun and a whole nother civilization that lives down under there. You got trees, you got grass, you got the whole nine. That's one of the theories. Another one of the theories is that the earth is hollow in a way that there are it's almost like an onion, how it has layers, where there'll be the crust, and it'll go down for so many miles, and then it'll be a wide open space.
And like pockets and caverns.
Isn't there there's a mushroom thing too, or something. Cave or something. I was reading about it. So I heard that there's something like mushroom cave. There's aliens. There's the Nazis are down there. There's Egyptians. There's blue people. You heard of the blue people, right? There was these 2 blue children that came out of this cave.
Oh, the green children.
The green children, sorry. The green children, it was actually bluish green, but they supposedly came from the center of the earth, and they found them in this cave, and I forget what country it was. But
I want to say Ireland or somewhere.
No, I think it was in Italy, maybe, or Mexico.
More like the worst conspiracy ever.
It was one of the countries. But they supposedly the boy died, but the girl lived and ended up getting in the village, and her skin went back to complexion because she was living. I guess your skin doesn't get air, so it's blue. But they were supposedly, they said they came from inside the earth, and there was a civilization there. So that's one that I've heard about. I don't know if you guys ever heard that story or not.
Yeah. I've definitely heard the story a long time ago. Yeah. And I heard they had green skin. But bluish green, that still works. That still works.
Of course, you have probably the most famous and most well-known theory, which is the terrestrial reptilians that live down there. We talked about that, I believe, the last time you were on the show, Marcus. That there's a race of humanoid reptile creatures that live under the earth, and supposedly that is their civilization as well. And the interesting thing to me about the Hollow Earth is that there have been some very famous and very well-respected scientists that have actually tried to say that the Earth was hollow as well. One of them was Edmund Halley, the guy that Halley's Comet is named after. And in 1692, he put forth a theory about the Earth being hollow, and he said that it had a 500-mile thick shell. But it was actually not one shell, it was 2 that like were on top of each other, so it was like layers. And then it had a core in the middle. And he said that there was atmospheres that separated the different shells, and that each one of those shells had its own magnetic poles, and that they rotated. And the cool thing about it was that they rotated, but they rotated at different speeds. And the reason he came up with all this is because he had some compass readings that were really messed up and didn't make any sense, and he couldn't explain them. He couldn't figure out why the compass was going wacky. So he came up with this hollow earth theory, and he thought that the 2 different shells that each had their own magnetic poles and they were rotating in different speeds, that could explain the weird compass readings he was getting. It's really, really cool. And then he even said that there was gas that was trapped down there as well, and that sometimes the gas would escape through, go through the pockets and escape through caves and stuff like that. And he actually said that is what caused the aurora borealis up in Alaska, up in the Arctic. It's just very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't heard that theory. That's actually kind of cool.
Well, there's a lot of weird stuff going in Antarctica anyway. There's under the water, there's supposed to be alien ships and giant aliens swimming around. So I could actually see that. I've always liked this. My friend always talked about this, and he talked about Admiral Byrd. He talked about how there was those children, what I was talking about earlier, and he also talked about there's supposed to be dinosaurs, or the city of Atlantis might be down. The people went there instead of falling into the ocean. There's all kinds of theories on it. I've heard. I don't know if I believe it. I mean, it's a possibility, not like the flat Earth theory, and we'll get into that later. But that's a whole different level. But I believe it could be a possibility. I don't think all the way down to the core of the center of the Earth, but I mean, it's not impossible. I mean, supposedly was higher civilizations at one time. Maybe they figured out get away from the planet. I mean, the top of the planet went to the bottom. You never know. And like they were saying, the reptilians, the aliens, that could be a possibility. That's where they're hiding. And then they came up from Earth from thousands of years ago, and they're supposedly talk about that. So I don't know. That is a good theory, James. What do you think about the alien theory? I
think the whole hollow earth theory itself is kind of a catch-all for every wacky idea and wacky conspiracy theory out there, in my opinion. I mean, because you have everything wrapped up in this. You have lost civilizations. You have aliens. You have reptilians. you have different fantasy creatures, because there's all kinds of different things. Like they say dwarfs, some people say elves, some people say trolls. There's so many different theories about Hollow Earth, and so to me, this is almost like a catch-all.
Well, I got to agree with you on that. I think there's got to be something down there, or maybe more than one or two things. There's probably, it might be a whole new other world down there. You never know. But the thing I'm questioning is, why would you go live in the middle of the Earth when you can just go to another planet if you know how to do that? You know what I'm saying? Why would you put that much effort in there, unless you're like you know, the reptilians? They have their own plot to mix in with the humans. But I mean, I can understand that one. Or Atlantis, they had to move there because it was an emergency. Maybe that was where they were. Remember, they were supposed to be in the ocean, and maybe that's where they went down to save themselves, you know, from whatever happened. The volcano caved in or something like that. Maybe that happened. I can understand that. But the Nazis, I don't know. They were getting pretty high up there in technology. You know, they were trying to bring zombies back and all kinds of stuff. You know, they had that crazy doctor was doing all kinds of weird experiments on people. And they said there was a lot of things they were able to do. There's also talk about Russia knew about it. Stalin was around too. I've heard stuff like that. You never know. I mean, I wouldn't put it past us. I mean, I think there's something on the moon too. That's why we don't go there all the time anymore. Because there's been stories that we've been warned never go back to that side of the moon. You know, with dark side of the moon and all that. There's supposed to be a alien base there. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
There was a really interesting thing that happened on the moon. NASA, I don't know if you guys remember this, but NASA sent a rocket to the moon, and they crashed the rocket into a specific spot in the moon, and they said they did it for testing and all this kind of stuff. But what was cool about it was if you actually watched the footage as they did it, because they aired it, so you could literally watch an onboard camera that had thermal imaging and everything as it went in. So this rocket is heading towards this crater in the moon. And as it's getting down deep into this crater, right before impact, like a few seconds before impact, you see it's just lit up red. There's a section there that's like a rectangle that is lit up red. And everything around it is blue. Now, if you know anything about thermal imaging, blue is cold. Red is a heat signature. That's showing heat. Usually it's showing something alive. If you're using a thermal scope and you're out hunting people or you're hunting animals or whatever, they're going to show up red and orange and yellow on your thermal image because that's heat signature. Everything that's cold around it's going to show up blue. Now, in the moon, inside of a deep, deep crater, everything around that should be blue. The entire crater should have been blue. There's no way that light is penetrating down there. It's complete darkness down there. The crater is that deep. So everything there should have been blue, but yet you had this perfect rectangle, look like a building that was constructed, that was just red as can be. And then the rocket goes straight into that spot, right into the red, and blows up. And then there's a big flash of red, and then nothing. So they hit something that was generating heat inside that crater. Now, NASA never explained it. They just acted like it didn't happen. But I saw it happen. That's very, very interesting, and that kind of lends a little bit of credibility to the idea that there might be some sort of base on the moon. Now, whether that base would be alien or whether that base is ours, maybe it's a military installation that we put up there, to service the space program or something like that nobody knows about. It's top secret or something. That could be. Or it could be an alien base, and maybe we didn't like the way they were acting, so we bombed it. You never know.
Well, I also heard that, when they sent, it was a nuke or something they sent up there, set off a nuke on the moon for whatever reason. And when that happened, the moon rang like a bell, like a metal bell. And so they're so now there's other theories that, possibly the moon is also hollow, that it's a man-made satellite or, alien-made satellite, that it's not solid rock. But that's a whole other weird theory.
That's another, we'll talk, maybe we'll do that the next show we do about the moon. That's a good idea.
Moon.
Yeah, hollow moon. I've never heard that one, though. That's the first for me. But
look that up, about the moon rings like a bell when it's struck.
Yeah, we will. And I've heard the story about the base. We'll talk about the base on there because I have heard that. There's been a lot of stuff about that. What I'm saying is, what I was trying to get the point, if they could do that, why would they want to live in the middle of the earth? I wouldn't want to live in the middle of the earth because there is lava there. That's a proven fact, and stuff like that. Unless they figure out how to go in a certain area where there isn't. But I don't know, James. You said there's lava there. You know, you're the scientist about this, so you know. You said there's no way there could be. It'd be almost impossible, wouldn't it?
To live in the core, yeah. I mean, you're not. Nothing is living there at the core. I mean, because it's all molten rock. I guess you could say the Earth is hollow in a way because there are caverns, there are voids, there are spaces down there where there are pockets. Okay, we find that when we drill for oil and stuff like that. When you drill down, you'll be going through rock, and all of a sudden, bam, you hit a pocket. And you might go for hundreds and hundreds of yards without hitting anything. It's just open. And then you go back into rock again. Sometimes you might go a mile or half a mile before you hit anything again. So there are those pockets that form inside of the Earth. But the idea, I mean, let's tackle them one by one, I guess. Yeah. The idea that the Earth is completely hollow. The idea that it's just a big hollow circle. Okay, that is impossible. Because with how big the Earth is, the mass of the Earth, it would collapse in on itself if it was hollow. It could not support the weight of the crust because you have, like, we've been like either 7 or 9 miles down drilling into the Earth's crust. And we know that it's solid rock that far. So if you do the math and you calculate the weight of that rock, there's no possible way that the Earth could be hollow inside, because if it was, it would just collapse in on itself. So that's the first one. The second one has to do, and this will address the moon ringing like a bell thing too. It has to do with gravity and the way that planets form. Okay, when a planet forms, all the dust or all the debris that come together to form a planet starts in the middle. Okay, it's just like a snowball. It starts with a little bit of snow, and as it rolls down a hill, it gathers more and more and more snow on top of itself. Now, as it rolls down that hill, it doesn't form a circle that's hollow inside. You know, it just layers it on. And that's kind of the same way it works with gravity when a planet forms, is you have all this dust and debris that will come together, and it'll form a very dense and very solid core, and it'll just start collecting onto that. So that you end up with a solid object. There's no real scientific way that something could form hollow that way. It just doesn't happen. The only thing that happens like that in nature is like a bubble or something like that, but that's not really hollow inside either. You know, even a bubble you blow, like when you're a kid, when you have those little things you stick the wand in the soap and you blow, that's not hollow either. It looks hollow, but it's not. It's filled with air. Air is what is filling that void to be able to keep the structural integrity of the outside of that bubble intact so it doesn't pop. It's air is pressing against it and holding it in place. If it was hollow, if there was no air, if you blew a bubble in a vacuum and there was no air inside of it, it would just collapse in on itself. And that's the exact same thing that the planet would do if it was actually completely hollow like that. Now, Halley's theory of there being rings inside the Earth that travel at different speed, that is reminiscent of the tectonic plates that move the continents around, that cause earthquakes when they rub together, that kind of thing. That does exist inside the Earth. And it's really interesting how they work, because that's how volcanoes are formed. Is you have the plates that move, and they will push the magma, and they will push the crust of the Earth as they go. And you'll have a point where they're coming together, and it will form a peak that will actually push up like a blackhead on your face. It'll push up out of the Earth, and it'll form like a volcano. And it'll actually push that magma right up into that volcano. When the pressure gets strong enough, the volcano erupts. It's very fascinating how it works, but that kind of gives credence a little bit to the theory that Halley came up with of there being rings that move. The idea that there's rings that move and there's actually atmospheres and skies and a sun, I mean, it's just nonsense.
What do you think about this theory of the Nazis? And
to understand the Nazis' obsession with the flat Earth and Antarctica, you have to go back a little bit further, and you have to understand Adolf Hitler's obsession with all things occult. He was trying to build an Aryan super race that could take over the world, basically. He started studying all these old legends and old folklores and really, really getting into the occult. Not only did he try to go to Antarctica. He sent a U-boat up there for a mission that they were trying to find a way down into the hollow earth. But he did all kinds of different things. They did experiments trying to bring the dead back to life. They did so many different things. And after the war, we actually stole most of their people. You know, most of their scientists and engineers, we actually took them and brought them here. So we took a lot of their top people, a lot of their rocket scientists and people like that. We brought them here, and we kind of hit them out, and they worked for us. You know, but Hitler was into all that different occult stuff, and he was always trying to find superpowers. There was talk that he actually sent an expedition to try to find the Holy Grail. They were looking for the Ark of the Covenant. There's all kinds of different things. You guys remember that scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark where the Nazis they get the Ark and they open it up and all that? That is based on reality because Hitler was actually trying to find it. There's some people that say, and some actual reputable people that say, that Hitler actually did find the Spear of Destiny. The Spear of Destiny, for those that don't know, is the spear that the Roman centurion used to pierce the side of Christ while he was hanging on the cross. The legend goes that whoever possesses the Spear of Destiny, he'll rule the world. He'll be unbeatable in battle. Nobody can defeat him. So what they say is that the Nazis actually found the Spear of Destiny. And that is why they were just rampaging over the entire earth and nobody could stop them for the longest time. And then there was a special mission by the United States that actually stole the Spear of Destiny from the Nazis and brought it back to America. And once they didn't have the Spear of Destiny anymore, they started losing. Because then they were just a normal mortal army again. And we were able to actually defeat them. And that explains why America had such a dramatic rise and became the world's superpower and the strongest and the greatest in the world. Because at the time of World War II, we were not the world's superpower. We were not the strongest country in the world. We had to ramp up like crazy just to be able to fight the war. The Japanese took out like almost our entire Navy at Pearl Harbor. We didn't barely even have any ships left after that. So we were not a strong military power at the time. And the legend goes that we stole the Spear of Destiny, and that made us into the world's superpower.
Yeah, I've heard. I mean, this is its own side shoot of conspiracy. But like I've heard, the Bushes have it. That's one theory that Prescott Bush has, or is in possession of the Spear of Destiny. Where it is now, no one knows.
See, that's one of those items that I think you got to keep a hold of. That's an important item because you don't want to lose that thing as a nation because who's going to get it? That's the question. You don't want somebody like Russia or China or heaven forbid North Korea or Iran or somebody like that to get a hold of the Spear of Destiny. That would be just bad news. So I hope wherever it is that they have that sucker locked down really, really tight.
Yeah. But yeah, like back into Germany and their expeditions to Antarctica, they set up New Swabia, and I think that's where Admiral Byrd's missions were going, to go reconnaissance, I don't know, like to go check out what the Nazis were up to, because that's 30 years after the Russians. It was like, what, 1960s, early 1960s, late 1950s? 50s, yeah, okay. But like, Hitler was heavy into the occult and heavy into like time travel. I don't know. We could go any direction here, but you get into like the Nazi bell if you've ever looked into that, and that was not sure if it was a time travel apparatus or if it was something derived of alien technologies. But at some point, yeah, the Germans did establish New Swabia, and that's on like one of the the coasts of Antarctica, and I think that's where Admiral Byrd kind of came into play, and I think they were going there because these Nazis were setting up camps and going underground and exploring and stuff.
Yeah, Admiral Byrd is a very interesting character because he flew a mission up to the North Pole. There's some controversy on whether he actually went there or not, because he left and he supposedly flew there and came back and told them all about it, and they had a big party for him and they gave him a medal and all this, and then he went to the South Pole to do the same thing. But people are saying now that they don't think that he actually went to the North Pole because the trip from where he left to the North Pole was, according to the speed that his aircraft was able to travel, would take 18 hours, and he came back in a little bit over 15 hours. So supposedly he went there and back in 15 hours, but it was an 18-hour trip. But his tale is very interesting because supposedly in a later mission, he actually flew into a cavern, like a really, really large cavern, and went down into the earth. And he said that he flew over like fields and forest and all kinds of stuff down inside of the earth. And that's one of the tales he told. And to me, that was really, really fascinating.
Well, and that's what he put in his diary, like right before he died. Like he finally divulged that, like he went to the South Pole. That's where he found the entrance to the center of the Earth, and something took hold of his plane and flew his plane like autopilot down into this hole and into the inner world.
Yeah, it was over Antarctica, correct?
Yeah, it was South Pole.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Like one of the things about Hollow Earth that I think is really interesting is if it was true. Okay, let's imagine that the inside of the Earth is completely hollow like an Easter egg, like I said before, or like a chocolate bunny. If it did not collapse on itself, which it would, but let's say for whatever reason it didn't, the inside of the Earth, you would be almost weightless inside of there. So if you were able to actually go into the inside of the Earth, you could float around like you were floating around in space. There would be almost no gravity. I think the actual equation is something like 1/3000th maybe of the gravity on the surface in the middle if it was actually hollow. So you would literally be able to just float around and fly wherever you wanted to inside the Earth, which is very, very cool.
Here's another theory. What do you think about there's like monsters too, dinosaurs? They say there might be dinosaurs, and that's where they might have some actually went because they found before they got killed, there's a habitat that went down into the earth and they got saved or something. What do you think about that? I've heard stuff about dinosaurs, and there's like an ocean down there too and all kinds. So what do you guys think about that too?
Yeah, supposedly there's oceans and giant cities, and they think, the dinosaurs that were around, millions of years ago, the reason why the dinosaurs on the surface got wiped out was because, a catastrophic event like a giant meteor hit the surface. So anything surface level got reset. Like all life on Earth was reset.
The idea of the ocean inside the Earth is interesting because we do know that there are very large bodies of water that exist under the crust of the Earth.
Yeah, and that's definitely scientific fact. They've found this out within the last few years that, like, holy cow, we've dug down so deep, we hit there's more water inside the Earth than there are on the surface. So that's scientific fact. That's something they found out. So
yeah, if you take all the water that's inside the Earth and you put it on the surface of the Earth, then what you will have is literally Noah's flood. The water will reach up to the top of mountains. It is that much water inside. That's what fuels our breadbasket in the United States, is there's a giant water supply underneath the middle of our country that farmers are using to irrigate their crops. They're funneling it up, and they're using that water, and it's starting to actually drain down some, and it's got scientists worried. But there's a ton of water, and in the Bible it talks about how the water for Noah's flood, not only did it start raining, but if you read the Bible, it came from underneath. It actually came from the ground. Water started coming up out of the earth. And then you had rain as well. So that's what caused that giant flood. And we know for a fact that there was a worldwide flood around the same time that the Bible says that Noah's flood occurred.
That's another thing that's really, really, really interesting is, okay, so about the time that Noah's flood should have occurred, you look into, Greek poetry, you have Plato, Greek, Roman, all that ancient Greek. Plato's story about the lost city of Atlantis took place, according to the story, about like 9,000 years before, Plato's time. There is scientific fact that if you were to add 9,000 years before Plato's time to where we are now, scientific fact has proven that around that same time, there's massive flooding. So that's another thing that kind of backs up biblical prophecy.
And it's more than just Plato as well, because every major civilization that the world has ever known, if you look at their histories, every single one has a story of a worldwide flood. Every single one. There's not one culture or one history on Earth that doesn't talk about a worldwide flood. So we know for a fact that it actually did happen. And I think that's just an amazing idea to picture the entire world being flooded like that. That is insane.
Well, I mean, you look at, a place like the Grand Canyon, and the only way for that type of erosion to happen in the Grand Canyon is flooding and, movement of water rapidly, just burring down the sides. And that's how they think the Grand Canyon was formed, as at one point there was water there. And they've even found, up in, mountains, skeletons or fossils of aquatic creatures. That why are they thousands of feet on a mountainside? Why are there fossils up there? Because at some point there was a lot of water everywhere.
What do you think about the theory of an asteroid taking out the dinosaurs? Because there's some speculation on that as well, whether it actually happened or not.
I think that would definitely do, dinosaurs or any civilization that may have been, pre, Egyptian, pre-Sumerian, pre-Babylonian, pre-Mayas and Incas. If there was civilizations then, and a meteor came and wiped out the dinosaurs, all of them would be gone too. Worldwide, that, if there was something that big that hit, because you'd go through a mini nuclear winter where there's so much ash in the sky, no sun and heat gets down to the earth and everything just freezes.
The thing I think about it is, the idea is that the impact happens, it displaces a lot of earth, it goes up into the atmosphere as dust, it blocks out the sun, or at least enough of the sun that a lot of the plants begin to die. The animals that eat the plants die, the animals that eat the animals that eat the plants die, and that's supposedly what happened to the dinosaurs. See, a lot of people think that an asteroid came and hit and blew up all the dinosaurs. Well, that's not exactly the way it happened. Supposedly, they died off because there was no food supply, and that's what killed them. Here's my problem with it. If you have an event like that blocks out the sun so the plant life dies, that kills the dinosaurs, supposedly. But that would also kill every other creature on the surface of the planet. According to the scientists, at the time of the dinosaurs, we were a tiny little mammal, like a little mouse or something like that. That kind of little creature, and we evolved from that point up. My problem is, if all the plant life dies, what the hell does a little mouse eat? You see what I'm saying? Everything on Earth would be dead if that was the case. If that actually happened, I'm not saying it wasn't an impact. I'm not saying that, because we can look at geology and we can look at the layer of Earth at that time period, and we know that something hit the Earth. Something happened there, because there is a layer of the right sedimentary materials. But if it was an event that blocked out the sun that would kill off the plant life, it would kill off all herbivores. And if all herbivores died, all carnivores would die. So there would be nothing left other than insects, really. And even insects eat plant life as well, so they probably wouldn't even survive. So literally the only thing that you would have that would still be alive would be some of the sea creatures that lived real deep. So I don't think that it could have been an event that blocked out the sun, because to me that just doesn't make any sense.
I also think that, whatever was on this rock that hit planet Earth, I think held within that was maybe the seeds of what we are today. So that, even though all this catastrophic stuff happened for all the life that was there originally, I think our seeds, because we're laying dormant in ice, once everything kind of settled, the dust cleared, things started to warming back up, and then that begot us.
Yeah, I've always wondered about something like that, because we're not designed to live here. We're the only creature on Earth that cannot live in its natural state.
We need clothes for warmth. If it gets too hot, we got to find a way to cool ourselves off. Yeah.
Exactly.
I
even the sun will kill us. If you go out without clothing on in the sun, you will burn. You will get sun poisoning, heat stroke, and you will die. We are not designed for the environment of the planet that we live on, which is insanity. And we are so sick all the time. We are so susceptible to viruses and sickness, where other animals are not like that at all. You know, we have to be very, very careful about what we eat. We have to make sure our food is cooked to a certain level, or we get all kinds of different illnesses like E. coli and salmonella and stuff like that. Most of the other animals on the planet can eat raw, maggot-infested meat if they want to, and it won't hurt them a bit. You have a whole bunch of scavengers that's what they do all the time, is they eat rotten meat, and it doesn't hurt them at all. But for us, if it's even slightly undercooked and it's the wrong kind of meat, we're done for. I mean, if you eat a piece of chicken that's even a little bit pink, you're toast. I've always wondered why, if we are the top of the food chain, okay, we are the best creature on Earth as far as survivability, as far as we made it to the top of the hill. Why are we so weak? Why are we completely and totally not adapted to our own planet?
We don't belong here. I think we rode in on a rock, that crashed here.
If evolution was true, okay, if we actually evolved from a small creature up until a primate, monkey, ape, whatever, and then we evolved into a human from there, if that is true, why did evolution all of a sudden stop? When we evolved, why did we not evolve defenses for all the things that kill us on our own planet? Why do we not have fur that will keep us warm? Why do we not have the ability to produce a large amount of blubber that will insulate our body without it killing us through heart attacks and high blood pressure and diabetes and all these other things? Why is our bodies not adapted to our own environment? If evolution was true, this has got to be the very worst way to adapt and to evolve ever. Let's make the brain gigantic so you're brilliant, but let's make the body complete rubbish so that you get sick every time you go outside. You can't even walk out in the sun. If anything, if you fall, you're dead. Insects can jump what would be for us the equivalent of almost a mile, and they can land no problem. It'd be like us jumping off the Empire State Building. An insect can do the same equivalency and be completely fine and just go about its day. But for us, if we fall 10 feet, we're dead. To me, it makes absolutely no sense. Why does our bodies not work on the planet that we live?
They say we are evolving because there's some people that can. There's a guy who goes swimming in the Arctic in the water, and he can make his blood temperature rise so he's warmer in the water. There's people who are born with tells. There's people who are born with stuff. They say that, you also remember, they hide stuff from us too. There's people who can use their mind. Back in the day when we were in the caveman days, we could eat raw food that we couldn't eat now. That's why we have an appendix. Now we don't even need an appendix anymore because it just defeats the purpose anymore. There is a possibility that you could have, and we're still evolving. It just takes a long time. Remember, we're only so many years in our evolving, supposedly. Like I said, if you believe that, but there is people that can do things that some people can't do. Like I can higher my body temperature. I meant to say blood. I mean body temperature with a guy who went swimming, and it's a proven fact. They did it and showed it. He could do it. I can do it. Not to go swim in the Arctic, but I can take certain kind of cold weather. And my body runs at 99.1, not 99.7.5 or whatever, 98.7.5 like everybody else. I run a little bit higher, so I'll keep warmer in colder weather. But some people's bodies can adapt to certain things. But you're right, we can't be naked out in the forest, majority of us. But it is funny when you live in a certain environment, you get used to that environment. When you're in the cold, if you live there for so many years, you get used to it. To somebody who's never been there can't handle it. Just like with heat. So we do adapt to a point, but we're not fur. But see, that brings the whole thing. Are we actually from this planet? Did we get brought here? And when you were saying about the Grand Canyon with all the rotation, it could have been a meteor. It went through the Grand Canyon too. That's another theory. So I don't know. That's all I got to say. Like I said, I'm not the expert on this, guys. So when you guys are listening to it, these guys know a lot about it.
But Hollow Earth would still work outside of it collapsing in on itself. But, it still is a sphere, and everything else spherical scientifically still works within the universe. Outside of, if it's hollow like a bunny, it would collapse in on itself. But minor detail.
Well, and you have the way that everything round in the world forms. You know, snowballs, boulders, planets, everything. It all forms basically the same way, and it's just impossible for it to form hollow. You know, it would have to be hollowed out by erosion or something like that. Maybe that could be an answer, maybe, is over billions and billions of years, if you have moving water underneath the earth, maybe it hollowed it out a little bit. I don't know. Maybe that's why the caverns exist underneath the earth. But as far as hollowing the entire thing out, I just don't see that happening. But the key that you said earlier, old boy, that when you said that we can adapt and, you know, you can live in an area and all this, adaptation is not evolution. You know, they're two different things. Yes, we can adapt as human beings to almost any environment, but evolution that's a huge change in the whole species. You're going to have little genetic mutations here and there, but over this long period of time, the whole point of evolution is to help the organism survive. It's to make it better, to make it stronger, to make it faster, to make it smarter, to make it better suited for the environment, to help survivability. So these things that I mentioned are huge red flags. They are huge things that cause us not to be able to survive very well. So that should be at the very top of the evolution list for us, is, okay, I can't go out in the sun because I will die. That is a huge problem. If I want the human race to continue, then that has to be addressed, because you can't go outside and die. That's just, your species is not going to survive that way. So those big kind of things is why I think evolution is hogwash, because the scientists say we've been around for millions and hundreds of millions of years back in the caveman days. A long, long time. Over that entire time, we would have been able to go out in the sun without burning. You know, you say that back in those times we could eat raw meat and digest it. If evolution is true, why can we not do it now? Why would we evolve to be weaker? That doesn't make any sense. That goes against the entire principle.
Because the food we make now, though, you're also going to realize everything's processed. And the way they do everything and dehydrate things, it's changed the way we eat altogether. That's why we have a lot of problems now, because a lot of the food they use now, it's killing us, because there's a lot of chemicals.
That's only like the last 50 years.
True. But it's killing us now, so that's proving a fact that's. But we did used to eat raw meat. It was a different kind of world then too. There wasn't chemicals in things. You got to remember that when we killed something, we cooked it like over a fire. It wasn't like, you know, barbecued like professionals like they do now. And they weren't. I don't think they were eating chicken back then. They were eating like mammoth and rhinoceros and, you know, what else was out there. Saber-toothed tigers. They weren't eating, you know, chickens and stuff like that. So it was a little bit different kind of food. It was a lot raw. But remember, the appendix, we used to need that. We don't need it anymore. That's what I'm saying. At that time, we could have been, we evolved from not eating that kind of food because we learned how to cook food better. So you're probably right on that. But people supposedly had stronger stomachs than we have now. Because remember, you don't need a fridge. Remember, they didn't use fridge back in the, you know, in the 1800s. They would make those things in the ground where it could keep cool, like meat and stuff like that. And they didn't have fridges and ice coolers and stuff like that and freezers at the time. So that's how. They had ice houses.
Yeah, they had buildings where they would put blocks of ice that would keep it cool. And if you dig a root cellar and you put your food down in your root cellar, it stays 50 degrees under the earth.
Yeah.
So it's basically the exact same thing as having it in a refrigerator. And back up in the mountain, my people, we used to take and like when we would get meat and stuff like that in the winter, you could put it down in the creek and it would stay cold, because the water in the creek was really, really cold. And even in the summertime, the water in the creek would come out because it comes right out of a spring up in a mountain, and it's cold water that goes down through there. So we would just take everything and wrap it in a burlap sack and put it down in the creek, and it would stay 45, 50 degrees, whatever the temperature of the water was, and it was just like being in a refrigerator. So we've had a form of refrigeration, maybe not an actual refrigerator that's in your house. Even before electricity, they had things called ice boxes. And you would have a guy that would come around who was the iceman, and he would bring blocks of ice, and he would slide inside of your ice box, which is basically just a piece of furniture, a box, that had a hole for ice, and then you could open it up and put stuff in it It had shelving in it, and that was your refrigerator back then, before we even had refrigeration or electricity. And see, this is a perfect illustration of how research actually works. This is exactly what happens every time I research something. I will start with one question, and I will say, why is the Earth hollow? Or is the Earth hollow? And I will start researching it, and that leads to 10 more questions. So then I research each one of those questions, and each one of those questions leads to 5 or 10 more questions. And by the time I end up at the end of it, I'm researching something completely different than what I started out researching. It's kind of a fun ride you go on when you do these things. And this show, I think, was the perfect illustration of that, because it goes from topic to topic to topic, but it's all under the same basic premise that we're trying to figure out. And it's just really just a fun conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. One rabbit hole will lead to 1,000 more, and those 1,000 lead to 1,000 each. You know, so it's it's a great conversation. There's all different directions you can take and focus, but yeah, it's everything leads back to something. But what that something is, we're not there yet. We got to keep digging.
That's true. But you guys got to realize something. If we were doing it by the technical way of the Hollow Earth, and like James would have said earlier, before we started the show, it would have been a very boring show. It would have been all, like science, like you're sitting through science class. And it would be, you know, what is really the Earth? And it's why we would be sitting here and we wouldn't have people listening to the show. So that's why we went into all these theories and different things, and these theories go into other theories. They all have something to do with each other, though. So that's why we're talking about it. And the flat Earth theory, you know, like I said, we're not going to get in that. But people are going to believe what you guys believe in it. That's your business. That we don't, just because we don't believe in something doesn't mean that doesn't exist or isn't real. That's just our opinions. You know, that's why we're not experts, and I'm not on top of the moon and doing, you know, space adventures and stuff like that. But if you guys want to believe it, that's your opinion. But, you know, the flat Earth theory is a whole different world. But I hope you guys, we tried to give you the best show we could. But, you know, this is a really hard theory, and there's a lot of research on this, but it's a lot of boring research if we got into it really deep, like James saying.
For the audience listening, I want to tell you, before this show, I did all this research. I had, and this is no lie, I have 86 pages, front and back, of research for this show. And a lot of it is boring science jargon. I'm talking density, I'm talking gravitational pull, I'm talking some of the stuff I try to talk a little bit about in the show and try not to make it so boring. But I mean, literally there's several pages of just equations that prove that the Earth is not hollow. And I was going through this, and we almost did this show a couple weeks ago, and I told old boy, I said, dude, I don't know how to do this show because it's boring as hell. It puts me to sleep when I'm doing the research for it. It's, you know, the actual proof of the Earth not being hollow is boring. I mean, when I did Flat Earth, I went through and scientifically proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Earth is not flat. And that was actually an interesting show. But the research on this is so much math and so much science jargon that 99.9% of the audience is not going to understand what I'm talking about. And they're not even going to care. It's going to be like you're sitting in algebra class and you're going to hate me. You're really not going to like me anymore after I do that show. So I told old boy, I said, dude, I don't know how to do this show, man. It's boring as all hell. I said, there's part of the Hollow Earth that's actually fun to talk about. You know, all the different weird theories and the Nazis and all that kind of stuff.
The Nazis, you know, the rainbow cities deep inside. There's dinosaurs, aliens. I mean, I think it's more fun on, you know, if you get away from like the scientific side that makes it implausible. But like the theories behind it, I think are a lot more fun than Flat Earth. Like Flat Earth, like there's not much fun about it, and there's not much that works about it. I've got my own theories on why Flat Earth has become a thing, but that's, again, another rabbit hole. That's some very dark territory. Won't get into that now. That's a whole other show.
What we try to do on Staring into the Abyss is, with a lot of these things, we will go through the evidence, and then we will make a determination whether we believe that the creature exists or whether the phenomenon or the theory is true. And believe me, I've gone through the evidence, and we did a little bit of it on the show here, and we talked about a bunch of different theories. So just for the sake of continuity for what we do, I'm going to say, in my opinion, Hollow Earth, completely busted, not true at all. The Earth is not hollow. Old boy, what's your ruling on it?
I don't think the world is hollow. The Earth is hollow. I believe there may be a little bit of truth to, like, there's something down there. Somebody found a way to hide in some part of the Earth down there, but I'm about 90% sure that the Earth is not hollow. I will say that it's not. What about you, Marcus?
Yeah, I don't think the Earth is hollow. I think there's deep down miles and miles of caverns and caves, and who knows what's down there. I don't think Earth is any more hollow than it is flat, and that's where I'm at.
Now, one interesting thing about what you just said, though, is who does know what's down there? We've only been, I think it's 9 miles, but it might only be 7 miles as far as we've drilled down into the Earth. So a lot of this is scientific theory based on math and best evidence, but we don't really know for sure 100% because we haven't been there. And we find, like, at the bottom of the ocean, by a lot of those vents down there where all kinds of poisonous gases are escaping from the center of the Earth, and it's pretty much nothing can live there is what we thought. Well, we actually sent submersibles down there, and we took readings, and we actually found that there are creatures that are living right inside those vents and right along those vents, and they're feeding off of the poisonous gases that would kill any other kind of life on Earth. So what I always say is life always finds a way. You show me the worst place in the world to live, and I'll show you something that lives there. There's always something.
Yeah, tiny creatures that can live in temperatures of thousands of degrees coming out of the hottest underwater sulfur vents. Sulfur, there's nothing could live in, but there's worm-like creatures. So that's a whole other biology that's unlike us. It's, it can't be carbon-based. They're living in like thousands of temperatures of degrees, and sulfur, like, I don't know, that could be alien, because it's not like us.
Now, I think there's a very good chance that there is something living inside the Earth. I think there's a very good chance that there's some sort of life form that can live down there, that can withstand the temperatures, can withstand the pressures, can withstand the gases down there. I bet you that there is something that lives in there. Maybe a lot of different things that live in there. But is there complete advanced civilizations? Is there a separate sun inside the Earth with a sky and forests and all that? I don't think so. I really honestly don't believe for 1 second that that's true. But there are, I imagine, things that do live in that environment down deep in the Earth where we can never go. I think that it's very, very possible, and I would even say probable, that something lives down there.
Oh yeah, whether it's recognizable, whether it's weird shapes, forms, bug-like amoebas, something's alive down there.
Yep, and we are just about out of time for the show this week. So, Marcus, would you like to give any shout-outs before we wrap up?
Our new movie, Song of Solomon's, going to be coming out in a few months. It's playing film festivals right now. If you can go see Song of Solomon at a film festival, go see it on the big screen. But DVDs and Blu-rays are coming out soon-ish.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank Marcus for coming on the show. Thank you very much, brother. I want to thank all our listeners all over the world. I want to give a shout-out to my daughter, my fans, my family, my girlfriend, James Hershey, for being awesome. And we're having one of the best shows that I think in the world. I don't care what anybody else thinks. And Marcus for being an awesome, guest and making awesome, crazy movies. So thank you, Misfits, Sugar Ladies, and Demon Hunters. Have a great night.
Yeah, this is what I love about about staring into the abyss is, what other radio show on the planet do you know of that would have a famous director on with a movie coming out, and we don't even talk about the movie like the whole show? We're talking about Hollow Earth and Nazis and all kinds of crazy stuff. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's always fun when Marcus comes on. We've done a couple shows now with him, and every show kind of goes the same way, where we start talking about one thing and we just go all over the map, but it's always fun, it's always interesting, and I always love having him on. So Marcus, I appreciate you coming on, brother. You're always welcome. And if Steven wants to come on as well sometime, he's always welcome also. Looking forward to Song of Solomon when it comes out. Hopefully we're going to have a show with Stephen Byro around that time period. It's going to be on exorcisms and demonology and stuff. That's going to be a really, really interesting show. He has a lot of knowledge in that area. So that should be a very fun one to do. The YouTube page is youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. The Patreon page is patreon.com/James Hershey Jr. You can go there. You can pledge if you want to help support the show. We also do advertising there and everything like that. So if you're interested in commercials or anything like that, hit us up. And thank you guys for all the love, for all the support. Until we speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do we. Bye-bye.
All these